Welcome to Business Line's State of the Economy podcast, where you'll find insight, analysis, and the story behind the numbers.
Hey all, welcome to Business Line's State of the Economy podcast on agriculture. Growth in the agriculture sector is expected to be better this fiscal. The center expects the real gross value addition in agriculture at 3.8% compared with 1.4% in the previous. Rain gods have been more kind this year, and as a result, the production of crops is expected to be better. In these circumstances, we will have Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presenting a budget over the next few days. What should the budget have for the agriculture sector? To tell us more on this, we have Mr. Anand Ramanathan, partner, Deloitte India. He will also tell us his expectations on the budget. Welcome to Business Line State of the Economy podcast on agriculture, Mr. Anand Ramanathan. So, can you kindly tell us how has the performance of the agriculture sector been in the current fiscal?
So the agricultural sector has been doing well in this fiscal compared to last fiscal. In fact, weather has been by and large a lot more predictable this year. So this year we expect in 24-25, we expect agriculture to grow by close to about 5%, right? Between 4 to 5%. While in the past year it was less than 1.5%, right? So we have seen a good agricultural season. At least Kharif season went off well with minimal disruption. And the monsoon activity again was predictable and consistent largely through most of the country. And hence, we've had a good year from an agriculture standpoint. The second reason is also globally, if you look at it, some of the supply disruptions which happened on the back of all of these different black swan events that occurred has somewhat stabilized, and that's another reason why the agricultural sector is doing well.
Are the activities of the allied agri sector such as dairy and poultry showing better performance this year?
So by and large, if we were to look at dairy, poultry, these are sectors which do much better. The allied sector does much better than food grains and the core agricultural production sector. And the reason for that is primarily because of demand side changes in consumption, right? If you look at protein consumption, it typically goes up with incomes increasing. And in this decade, if we were to look at middle income households, India will add about 100 million middle income households. These are households between 3 lakhs to 30 lakhs of income. And hence, you will have more income available to fund food consumption. And when this happens, typically proteins gain. And therefore, we will see both dairy and poultry continue to do very well. They both grow like in double digits. I mean, 10% plus minus has been consistent growth rates for these sectors, and they will continue, right, for the next 5 odd years till the end of the decade. So, while demand consumption is one main reason, the other area is also supply. We have seen supply try and keep in step with demand, but still, if you look at the price increases, that's been another major reason why overall growth in this sector has happened, because demand far outstrips supply, which is one of the reasons why you see price increases happen often in these sectors. So both price and volumes are going up, and hence this will continue to see momentum, and the allied sector will do very well, including aspects around vegetarian proteins as well as marine, for example. Some of these areas which are also in the protein space will do well beyond dairy and poultry.
Mr. Anand Ramanathan, what have been the positives for this fiscal and what are the negatives?
Well, the big positive, I guess, is more external in terms of weather activity being a lot better than the year past. And the second big area is also, if we were to look at regional balance, right, in terms of weather being predictable and consistent, it's been a lot more predictable this season, right? So weather is one big area. The second big positive has primarily been all of these efforts to put more money into the hands of the farmer. if you look at agricultural credit, it's growing at 20% plus minus. And this will again sustain to grow because with greater availability of insurance schemes, with greater availability of banks willing to support farm sector activity, we will see more credit and financial inclusion penetrate this sector, which is important because farmer incomes need to be consistent. And again, this year, we've seen some major efforts in enhancing the availability of both cheap credit as well as insurance. The third big positive in agriculture is also weeding out some of the inefficiencies through direct benefit transfer wherever possible, and also moving budgets from funding things like fertilizers and other input subsidies to funding a better price realization for the farmer by investing in infrastructure, by investing in market linkages. These are all areas where we've seen continued focus like over the past decade or so. And hence, that is beginning to bear fruit in terms of the productivity and efficiency that there is in agriculture. In terms of negatives, I think we still have a very high subsidy bill. And especially with some of these global disruptions on fertilizers, it's again one of those areas where it's very difficult to do away with these subsidies, right? There is so much dependence of the economy on subsidies that reducing some of this burden has always been a challenge, and it continues to be so. The second big negative is probably to look at this import substitution. While a lot has been done on pulses and oil seeds and to divert production from wheat and rice, which we may not necessarily need, still it is a challenge because MSP does provide a certain security cover for the farmer to grow some of these crops. And at the same time, there is also a lack of awareness on what else can be grown and availability of different high yield varieties beyond just traditional grains like wheat and rice, which the Green Revolution kind of focused upon. So, moving away from some of these cultivation practices to new age crops in horticulture, for example, in pulses, oil seeds, and other areas where we need to substitute imports. That's going to be another area where we need a lot more integrated focus, right? So rather than just a one-off incentive or a one-off policy intervention, can we look at some of the more arid parts of the country and see how is it that we can make the varieties of oil seeds available and at the same time make irrigation available along with necessary market linkages for farmers to divert some of their resources that they use to produce rice and wheat to areas like oil seeds and pulses. And maybe the last area in terms of what can improve is the entire food processing ecosystem, because globally we've seen food processing is about 4 to 5 times the size of the agricultural sector. In India, it would still be about 1.5 to 2 times, and hence there's a lot more scope for attracting greater levels of investment into food processing. And some of this is also linked to looking at how India can cater to a wider demand that comes in from the Indo-Pacific, right? Whether it's Africa, whether it's Middle East, can we look at more food processing capacity in India to take advantage of all of its natural resources and agroclimatic zones to produce for the region? And therefore, how do you make it more attractive for companies to invest in the food processing sector? And also make it easier for them to access some of the produce, because a lot of the produce in India is still not processable. So can we grow more processable varieties, which will attract investments into this very important sector, right? So these are three potential areas where we can see further efficiency and growth added to the agricultural economy with some focus and some investments.
What do you think the center should do for the agriculture sector in the budget for the coming fiscal, and what are your expectations?
Specifically from a budget standpoint, I think there's a lot of talk about consumption and what we are seeing in terms of urban consumption slowing down. So one of the areas which we definitely need to look at is how is it that we can put more money in the hands of the consumer to spend more on food and other discretionary items which are dependent on the agricultural ecosystem. And also given inflation, how is it that more consumption can happen in food itself, which will have a cascading impact on the agricultural sector. And some of the ways this can be done is to look at two or three things. One is when we look at all of these different direct benefit transfer schemes to farmers, can we put more money in the hands of the farmer itself? It can happen in two different ways. One is can we have a better price realization and therefore reduce some of the post harvest inefficiencies which we have, and also look at better varieties and making it more available to the farmers so that they get higher yield from the resources that they have. The second is to put more money itself through direct benefit transfers, especially PM Kisan, and what can be done to increase some of the direct transfers that happen to farmers, right? So these could be two areas where we can see at least some efforts to enhance consumption, particularly rural consumption, which again is dependent on not just agriculture, but also things like, say, for example, low cost housing. Can we invest more in these areas, which will have a multiplier effect in terms of all different kinds of consumption going up, including the need to consume more food, to consume more other, textiles and other products which are dependent on the agricultural ecosystem. The second area where the budget can do a lot more is on the side of energy. So, can we look at low cost availability of power, of water resources? These are some of the areas where food processing really depends on availability of cheap power and processing. So, what can be done to bring down the cost of food processing itself, which makes India more attractive from a manufacturing standpoint? And hence, how can we thereby incentivize linking up production linked incentives to overall demand that India has for the food processing sector, which will have a cascading impact on agribusiness itself and the prices that agricultural commodities would receive. The third area is specifically to look at new crops, right, where there is demand in the market. We spoke of horticulture and fruits, but beyond that also, can we look at millets, for example? A lot of focus in the last few years. How can we build on that to promote more varieties of millets to be grown and at the same time create market linkages for them, right? So can we look at some of these newer spaces where there is demand in the market, particularly for products and processed food, which is healthy. So how is it that we can link some of these changes in the overall environment uh, for a greater variety of agricultural produce? And can we look at incentivizing farmers, making more varieties accessible, promote more R&D in seeds and in understanding climate resilient varieties, particularly in areas like millet and horticulture, for linking and connecting supply to demand in a way where demand is at least supply is aligned to demand, and the farmer grows crops which are commercially relevant rather than just focus on traditional crops where there is MSP support.
Any particular activity in agriculture you think should be the focus of the budget this year?
So one area in terms of activities will be around looking at farmer producer organizations, right? I think we have seen whether you take the example of grapes or bananas, a lot of the times when FPOs get involved, it also has a link to how efficiently implementation happens. And especially in export dependent commodities, it's useful to go through collective bargaining, which enhances the efficiency of both input utilization as well as realizing better prices for the output, right? So, in terms of just modernizing some of these FPOs, and helping them organize better, take advantage of technology, both to source supplies as well as to sell produce, will be an important area of intervention. The second area is also urban farming. I mean, it got some focus in the previous budget where there was talk about setting up these horticulture parks around urban cities. I think urban India is increasingly becoming very important for consumption. Overall, about 2/3 of all consumption happens through the 4,000 odd urban centers that we have in the country. And there is a need, especially with quick commerce and e-commerce and all of that growing, for supply of better quality fruits, vegetables to some of these players, whether it is retailers or e-commerce players. So how is it that we can build this infrastructure in the vicinity of the city itself to cater to consumption is an area where I think a lot more focus will help drive better efficiencies in agriculture and also widen the portfolio of products and varieties that are available for farmers to grow. So this is another area which is where I expect some focus from the current budget.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anand Ramanathan, for your very insightful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Pleasure speaking to all of you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you all listeners for tuning in. Until we meet in our next episode. Bye all.